Hello, welcome to the DraftKings Daily Trot. Of course, you know I'm Big Italy 42 and he's Scott Maywood, got Sports 25 to life. We're talking about tonight's slate. As usual, monster slate of action on Tuesday, and quite a few pitchers that we actually feel pretty good about today. We were talking for a minute before the show here, and I'll go ahead and throw out my top option. I know there's a guy that you like, similarly priced. So my favorite pitcher is James Shields, $9,700. You got the team that strikes out the second most against righties, against the guy who has the second highest strikeout rate in the league. A lot of things going in his favor. Luckily, he's also in Petco Park, which suppresses home runs, 6.5 run total. Really what you're worried about there with the Cubs is the big-time upside with the home runs. And if Shields, I mean, you expect he's going to get a lot of strikeouts either way. So I think he's got a nice, safe floor tonight.
Right, definitely. Wind blowing in that one, too, helps him out a little bit there also.
Yeah.
I like Shields. All the numbers look great. I mean, the strikeouts have been fantastic. The big thing that's holding me back from really just absolutely loving him as a cash game play is he's only pitched over 6 innings one time this season. And so that's a little bit of what is making me look at some other options tonight, not having him just be far and away my favorite option. I still think he's probably the safest cash game option. Despite only pitching over 6 innings in one game, he's only pitched under 6 innings in one game too. So you're pretty likely getting 6 innings out of him. Maybe a couple more if he's pitching well. The strikeouts are the big thing there for him, though. The guy I really like today is Gio Gonzalez. He's been a little bit up and down this season, but I really like the matchup with the Yankees today. They're a lot better team against right-handers because they can load up that lineup with lefty bats that have some power, especially at home in their park where it really rewards lefty bats. They're in Washington today. I think that's a really strong pitcher's park for Gio to pitch in. He's been really solid at home. Last start at home, he faced Atlanta, struck out 8 guys in 7 innings, gave up 2 earned runs, was pretty strong in that game. Had back-to-back really strong starts before he got rocked a little bit against Arizona last time out. A little bit cheaper than Shields on DraftKings at $9,000. He's probably my favorite pitching play today, but like you mentioned, there's probably 4 or 5 guys that you can really feel pretty good about in that price range, and none of them really stands out to me a ton.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, other guys are fine options. I'm not going to be playing Johnny Cueto against the Royals because I don't play pitchers against the Royals. If he's not getting a bunch of strikeouts, I mean, he's a good tournament option, obviously. Sonny Gray's a guy that's been pitching well, but at Houston, we know Houston's mashing the ball at home. I think they're in a fine spot. He's the most expensive pitcher on the board, too, which kind of scares you away a little bit. And a little bit cheaper, I don't mind Anibal Sanchez at all at $8,100. He's a big favorite around 180 against Milwaukee, who they're getting by on name recognition alone. This team is just not hitting the ball well. They're 24th league against righties, so I'm a big fan of Sanchez there if you want to dip a little bit lower.
Yeah, definitely. I think he's probably the safest guy on the board today, price point wise. I mean, you're paying $1,000 less at least for him than all these other guys we've mentioned so far. Like you said, he's a really heavy favorite. Even if he gives up a few runs, he has that Tigers offense behind him. They're facing Jimmy Nelson, who has been pretty good this year, but is always prone to blow up, especially against a team with as much power as the Tigers. So I think Sanchez is probably the safest cash game play today. And then at that price, I mean, you can almost pair him with one of these other guys around 9,000 and still get some pretty decent bats in your lineup. So that's a pretty good approach for me. Not a ton I like cheap-wise today. Is there anybody you're really in love with value-wise?
No, I mean, there's a couple guys that I'm looking at for tournaments that have upside, like Trevor Bauer, obviously with the big strikeout rate, nice swing and strike rate. I think he's an interesting tournament play at 6,800. We saw Corey Kluber pretty much strike out every single batter, back to back to back. He's obviously not Corey Kluber, but he's got big-time strikeout upside, so I like him. If I'm going really cheap, I mean, let me rephrase that. I'm not going to go really cheap because I really just don't love – I mean, Carlos Frias I think is interesting, but the Giants are really hitting the ball well now, and we know Frias tough on righties, but now they're hitting righties really well. Obviously, pitcher's park, so I guess if I had to go with the cheap option, it would probably be Carlos Frias at $5,500.
Yeah, he kind of let me down last time he pitched too, and I'm not a big guy on just holding a grudge against anyone, but I mean, 5 strikeouts, 6 innings, that's about what you're getting from him in a good start.
Yep.
Maybe 6 strikeouts in 5 innings, something like that. It looks like they're stretching him out a little bit. If he can start getting more innings under his belt, and I mean, he's always got the Dodgers offense behind him, which is big, but Not a guy I'm in love with today. I think he's probably one of the better options in that range. The guy that I'm probably going with in that range at 6,000 is Tuan Walker. He's been pretty solid lately. 6 innings, 6 strikeouts last time out against San Diego. I don't mind the matchup with Baltimore. They've been struggling a little bit with righties lately. He's an underdog, though, so it's definitely more of a GPP play. In cash games, like we were talking about, you probably want to stay towards the top of this list today.
Yep.
Even if you have to give up some hitting, there's just not really anybody you can feel good about. I mean, you're looking at guys like Tom Kohler, who's been okay lately. He's a favorite against Arizona, but that Arizona lineup scares me a little bit. There's just so much power in the middle of it that, I mean, if you get into trouble and you're going through the middle of that order, it can always be a huge inning. Not really anybody else that stands out, though. I mean, there's no real favorites down where we're talking about. I mean, Aaron Sanchez is a minus 120 favorite, I think, last I looked. Not a guy I feel good about, despite the matchup with the Angels, who've been really struggling hitting. But, I mean, there's just no one to get excited about, no one to feel really strongly about. I agree with you. I think Bauer's a decent play. That's about it as far as cheap pitchers go.
Yeah, and I'm with you on Walker there too. Well, he was a guy I wasn't really considering, but when you look at the numbers, Baltimore is striking out the third highest amount of any team against right-handed pitching. So they do have a lot of power, but that means they're also swinging the bat a lot and swinging the bat hard. So when they miss, he's got big time upside. So if his command's there, then he definitely has some big time upside here. All right, let's go ahead and move on to catcher, where no surprise if you know me or if you know who Stephen Vogt is, that I love Stephen Vogt tonight against Roberto Hernandez. So he's my top option if I'm paying up. I mean, Buster Posey, I guess, is an okay option, but he's in a pitcher's park against a guy who's been tough on righties, so not a guy I'm in love with. Russell Martin, you can certainly consider. I love the Blue Jays bats today at $4,600, so I think he's an interesting play also.
I always like Carlos Santana against the lefty. He's going to be one of my favorite GPP plays today. I mean, he just hasn't been very good this season is his biggest problem. I like him against lefties, but he's got to be a GPP play for me at this point until he gets the bats going. I agree with you on the rest of the guys. I think those are all really strong plays. If you're looking for a cheaper guy, I mean, there's no one that's really been hitting super high in the order as far as cheap guys go. Kurt Suzuki, okay against Liriano. He's got decent splits against lefties. Has been hitting like 5th or 6th in the order against lefties. The rest of these guys that are kind of cheap and have tough matchups for the most part, and they're not hitting high in the order. Like Miguel Montero faces Shields today. He'll probably hit 5th or 6th, but you mentioned how much you like Shields today. I don't feel great about Montero. Outside of that, everyone else is hitting pretty low. I think I'm going to pay up at catcher today.
Yeah, I think the only cheap guy I'd be considering for tournaments here is Robinson Chirinos, because he does have big power against lefties, and Wade Miley, as we know, struggles against pretty much everyone, but mostly against righties. So $3,400 for some big-time upside. I don't mind that in tournaments.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on here to first base. Of course, there's a lot of options. I mean, same old story here. There's some guys that are pretty cheap. I like Joey Votto at $4,300, of course. You've got guys like David Ortiz and Albert Pujols, both in fine spots at $4,100 if you wanted to go that route. And then, of course, if you're trying to target cores, Ryan Howard at $4,400 makes for a fine play also.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's probably the direction I'm going there. I like Votto at $4,300. Cabrera's a little pricey for me against Nelson today. Probably going to avoid that. Same thing with Goldschmidt. I mean, they're both GPP plays, but I don't really want to pay that much when you can get Votto for 43. You mentioned Howard for 45 in a GPP, or 44 in a GPP. Yep. Adrian Gonzalez at $4,900 is probably a better cash game play than both of those guys against a righty in Hudson that's pitching to contact almost exclusively at this point. Edwin Encarnacion against a lefty is probably my favorite GPP play in that over 5K range against Santiago. That's a really strong play for me. I'm paying up at first base today. There's too many of these guys that have really solid matchups to go cheap here.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Nobody cheap, I mean, even consider. You're going to need to have one of these big power bats in your lineups tonight.
Yeah.
Moving on to second base, of course, you've got a guy like D. Gordon who's in a fine spot against a weak righty at $4,800. You're going to consider him for your cash games, GPPs, everything. Chase Utley was okay yesterday. He's in Colorado. He's got a fine matchup, but at $4,400, I really struggle to pay that tag outside of I mean, strictly GPPs, and probably not that many of them, because he just doesn't have that power upside at this point. And you and I talk about the hitters every week, and he's just been so bad. And he's been okay for the last couple of weeks, or last couple of games, I should say, but just not a guy that I'm in love with tonight.
Yeah, definitely. I feel the same way. Second base is a position I'm looking to spend a little less at today after we've kind of spent up at catcher and first base here. Corey Spangenberg has been hitting first and second almost exclusively lately. Facing another righty tonight. Got to assume he's going to be at the top of that order again. He's cooled off a little bit over the last couple games, but he started out pretty hot once he got moved up to the top there. Tommy Field facing a lefty today, only 2,600. Spangenberg's 2,800, by the way. Sorry I didn't mention his price there. Field's been hitting pretty low in the order, though. It hasn't been anything special. Not a guy I feel great about.
Yeah.
I mean, he's just a guy that's there, and he's not 2,200 anymore. He's 2,600. So I'd much rather go Spangenberg there. Neil Walker is probably the other second baseman I'm looking at. Facing righty in Nolasco, been hitting second in the order against righties. Wind's blowing out pretty heavily there to right field right now, so that'll be something to keep an eye on. Since he's going to be hitting from the left side of the plate today, I think that could make him a really nice play if that wind stays where it's at, 10 to 15, or picks up a little bit.
Yeah, and that price under 4K is great for him. Cash games and GPPs, I think. And another guy you can consider, obviously hits lefties pretty well, Danny Valencia, 3K. Second base, third base eligibility there if you want another cheap option. But I'm with you there. Yep. I'll probably be going with one of those cheaper options there, save a little bit of money. Third base, it's Josh Donaldson against the bad lefty. Of course, I love Josh Donaldson. I'm guessing you do too. I'm guessing most people do. Should be one of the most popular plays at any position tonight, I would imagine. So get him in some of your GPPs. I'll probably try to get him in my cash game lineups as well as hard as I can. Adrian Beltre has a great matchup tonight against Wade Miley. He's finally starting to get his power stroke, starting to hit the ball well. 4,500 makes him a fine play as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I really like him tonight. You mentioned most of the guys I'm on. A couple cheap guys you can look at if you want to. Mark Reynolds against a lefty is a decent GPP option today. Probably going to hit fifth or sixth against Nice. Pedro Alvarez, another lefty against Nolasco in that same Pittsburgh game with the wind blown out to right. I think he's a strong GPP play today. Nobody really value as like a ton for cash games. You mentioned Valencia at second base already. He's probably the cash game value option I'll be looking at third base.
Yeah, I agree with you. There's not a whole lot else. Logan Forsythe's been hitting the ball pretty well recently. He's a righty-righty matchup tonight, but he's batted second or fifth in his last couple games. So either one of those positions I think is fine at 3,200 if you wanted to go down cheaper a little bit.
Yeah.
All right, speaking of ugly, shortstop is really ugly tonight. I'm not paying for Troy Tulowitzki still. Sorry, don't care about the matchup. It's a fine matchup, but until he does something, I'm not paying almost 5K for him. And Aaron Herring's been okay. We'll see how that works out for him in Coors Field tonight. I don't think it's going to be particularly good, but I don't really have any faith in Tulo doing much, so not going to be paying for him. Brandon Crawford's a guy that's been absolutely on fire right now. 4K, I think he's a fine option. Johnny Peralta against the lefty at $3,900. And Brad Miller, if he's batting second against Miguel Gonzalez, the home run machine at $39. I think those will be my main targets around that price range.
Yeah, definitely. Not a ton else to like at shortstop. I'll mention Jimmy Rollins again. Has reached base 4 games in a row. Looks like he's finally getting it going. I'm just going to keep playing him and hope he keeps getting on base. Outside of that, not a lot else I really like. Peralta against the lefty and Nice is probably the other guy I'd look at in that below 4K range, but I think I'm probably sticking with the guys you mentioned, maybe get some Peralta in there. Jimmy Rollins is probably going to be my cash game play.
Yep. One other guy I'll throw out there is Zach Cozart. If he's batting second, he usually bats second against lefties, but Rodano Ventura has been really bad over his last 3 games, so if Cozart gets a decent lineup spot, I don't mind him at a cheap 3.4K price tag there. All right, let's go ahead and move on here to the outfield where the best hitter in the entire world right now, Bryce Harper, is $5,600. If you can afford him, good luck fitting him in your cash games with 2 decent pitchers. I don't think it's going to happen, but you obviously want some exposure in GPPs there. He's just otherworldly right now. I love Joey Bautista at $4,800 against the lefty at home. He's probably going to be the guy that I pay up for more often than not if I'm paying up in the outfield. And then outside of him, as far as expensive options go, I really like Carlos Gonzalez at $4,500.
Yeah, that's a great play today. Absolutely fantastic price there. Um, I really like Gregory Polanco against Nolasco here. He's a pretty strong play at 3,500. That's going to be a major cash game play for me.
Nice find.
Obviously has good upside, but I feel like he's going to be kind of heavily owned because of that price, facing a fairly weak righty today. I don't mind Charlie Blackmon also in that Colorado outfield against Serang. Only 4,500 there too. Hitting at the top of their order. There's one other guy I had kind of towards the top here. Oh, Bryce Harper, 5,600. That almost feels a little cheap for him in this game, facing Eovaldi. I mean, I think he's a really strong play. He's probably going to be a little bit under-owned because of that price, despite the fact that he's been so red hot. So I think he's a pretty interesting GPP play today. Definitely a cash game play also, but he's going to be hard to fit with the way it looks like we're approaching pitching today, because the pitching's expensive today if you want solid options.
Yeah, and for once, Bryce Harper, significant discount from FanDuel, where they've got him well over $6K there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's enormous. So if you want Bryce Harper, DK is the place to get him. Ryan Rayburn gets another lefty. Fortunately for him, it's not Chris Sale tonight, so at $2,700, obviously he's in a great spot. A couple other cheap guys. You've got Billy Burns at 2.8K if he's back in the lineup tonight. You got the day off yesterday for the ghost of Coco Crisp, who just stands up there and has no chance of getting hits or getting on base. I mean, gotta imagine he gets his shot again, because at least he's being productive. Coco Crisp, something's up. Maybe he's done for. I don't know. But he just looks awful out there. And then, assuming he's leading off, I'll, of course, once again mention Kevin Kiermaier. He's been hitting the ball pretty well. Yep. $3,800 makes him a nice cash game option tonight as well. Yeah,
I feel the same way about Jock Peterson, too. 3,800 is a pretty nice price there. Another guy a little bit lower than that, Peter Boros. Hasn't been great for St. Louis, but leading off, top of that lineup, he's had a hit in half of his last 8 games, 4 of 8. I mean, he's just a decent play at 3,200. I like the guys we just mentioned at 38 quite a bit more. Maybe even Grady Sizemore at 3,600 in Colorado if he's in the middle of that lineup against Bettis. There's a lot of guys in that range today in the outfield, though. I think that's where you can save some money. If you're not playing someone like Harper or something like that, you could definitely get 3 solid outfielders below 4K today.
Yeah, absolutely. With that, that's going to wrap things up. Find us on Twitter at DFCafe. Of course, all of our content for tonight's action at dailyfantasycafe.com, and we'll see you next time.